Okay, so we're recording right now. Um, so thank you for being here, everyone. I'll just do a quick intro. My name is Brooke Schmidt, for those who don't know me. I'm a marriage and family therapist. I've been doing this for, how long has it been? Close to 10 years. And I got started with essential oils in 2014. Originally, it was to support mine and my family's health in a natural way. But then when I found out they supported emotions, that was an added bonus, and that got me really excited. So I thought it would be fun to do a lot of what I've learned in my training with, with using essential oils to support your emotions. So tonight we're going to go over a lot of different emotions. I sent you guys 2 handouts on, you should have the 8 basic emotion chart and then the 8 basic emotions with their gifts. And then there's a link to view the, the feelings chart. And so if you have those handy, you can pull them out. I did put them in the slides, so you'll be able to see those, but the print might be a little small. But anyway, we're going to first talk about a lot of emotions, and then we'll kind of go over like why all of that is really important to know. And then we'll go over a lot of different oils you can use to support your emotions. And then lastly, there's a little exercise that we'll do quick. And that's why I wanted everyone to have the frankincense, lavender, and stress away. So if you have those on hand, we'll use those at the very end. So if anyone has any questions, you should be able to unmute yourself in the lower left-hand corner. There's a microphone that you should be able to unmute yourself. Feel free to jump in anytime and ask any questions that you would have. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Okay, so first, if you are going to use essential oils to support your emotions, you really want to know what it is that you're feeling. So we're going to go over a lot about emotions, but a few things I like to point out is that emotions don't always have to be big, and you can feel a little of this and a little of that. I mean, I've had some clients feel like, I'm trying to think of a good example, but I've worked with a lot of couples who have overcome infidelity. And so when they're on a really good path, the hurt partner will say, something like, I am so excited for like our new marriage. I'm so excited for all the healing we've done. But then I'll remember like what happened. And so I feel like so grateful and so happy. And then on the other side, like so hurt. So they have those feelings at the same exact time. And so that can be a little confusing, but you can feel, a little of this and a little of that at the same time. And they're not always consistent. So, and we'll get into more of that in a little bit. But so first, I just want to go over a lot of what emotions are and where you feel them in your body. So if you have your feelings chart, let's see, we are going to go over, we're going to go over the one on the left-hand side first. You can have your own emotion, and you can have what's called a carried emotion. So if you can see my mouse cursor, there's your own emotion is going to be in this column, and then your carried emotion is going to be in that far right column. And what the carried emotions are is going to be like your generational, like your family's generational emotions that haven't been dealt with. So for example, anger is like, let's say, this is going to be an extreme example, not entirely uncommon either, unfortunately, but let's say you grew up with a parent who at times would like rage anger at you. Chances are pretty good that they grew up with a parent who would rage anger. and chances are really good that they grew up with a parent who would rage. And so that anger is just carried down from generation to generation. It gets passed down until one person says, you know what, I'm done. I'm not going to do this anymore. And then they, do some work on themselves or somehow get help for basically like coming to terms with that anger, releasing it. And essentially you can, like metaphorically or experientially, give that anger back to the person who gave it to you, so that you don't have to carry that burden anymore. And so that's what the carried emotions are. I think every one of us has a carried emotion from our families. Like I said, with that rage example, I mean, that's a pretty heavy one. Some people might have, they might not rage, but they might feel anger in their gut or that pressure, and that would be a carried emotion. Your own anger, you're going to feel all over your body. It'll actually feel kind of powerful and energizing. So that's one way to tell the difference when you look at this chart, what is your own emotion and what is going to be like a generational emotion. And so this can really come in handy when I just think a lot of what we're feeling, if you really know what's happening in your body, you can really work with that and release emotions. And we'll, of course, get into how you can use essential oils to do all of that. But that's just a chart to kind of help with knowing when you're feeling a feeling, where are you feeling it? Because that can, make a difference on whether it's a carried or your own. Fear, again, I should say most carried emotions you're going to feel in your gut. But you could, some people, I've had clients where they'll, some people aren't as in touch with their emotions as other people. So someone who might not be as in touch with their emotions, they might say something like, or I'll ask them how they're feeling, and they might say something like, well, I think I'm fearful. And then we'll take a look at the chart and they'll say, well, I'm actually, feeling that fear like in my chest. And then I'll say to them like, well, that's actually pain. Then when they hear that, they're like, oh yeah, now that makes sense. That is pain. So it can be surprising where, if you have an emotion come up, you might be able to name it, but you could go to the chart and just double check, like think about where you're feeling it in your body and then double check and see if the body's, where you're feeling it in your body lines up with what you thought it was. So like I said, just jump in if you have any questions on any of this. Your own emotions are going to be very manageable. They're going to be uncomfortable, but they'll still be manageable. Carried emotions are going to feel unmanageable. So like if you do something embarrassing, you're going to feel some shame. Embarrassment is actually healthy shame, but it should go away within, I don't know, a few hours even. Some people feel that shame for days. And, it could be one event that happened and you just feel the shame for days. That would definitely be a carried emotion or a carried shame, because if you're feeling shame for days, that's going to be unmanageable. So yeah, you can kind of just see where all of, where you're going to feel it. In this column here, those are going to be, all the emotions on the far left are going to be the primary emotions. And then the next column over, these are going to be kind of the like little offshoots of the emotions. On the other hand, each emotion has a gift to it. So if you can, now we'll move on to the chart on the right-hand side. And that is, going to tell you, so like if you're feeling an emotion that's unpleasant, you can look at the gift to it and try to tap in to what that emotion's trying to tell you, or, like what's the gift that it's going to bring. So like shame, for example, Well, you're human. Nobody is perfect. So if you feel shame, it could be a good reminder that you're human, or you can then contain yourself. Maybe you were boundaryless and then you feel shame over that. Well, now you know you can contain yourself for next time. Something like anger, that's going to give you strength and energy. If you're angry about something, you then can have the energy to make a change. Like fear is going to be protection, is one of the gifts. Guilt, if you feel guilty, that's usually a value. You did something that your value doesn't line up with, and then you can check your values and make amends if you need to. So I love these charts. I use them all the time. I think it's just a really good way to get to know like really what it is that you're feeling. And like I said, if you're feeling something, not everyone can name their emotions. If you're feeling something, you can do a quick body scan and just notice, like, where are you feeling that feeling in your body? And then come here and try to find the matching emotion. Men in particular, most of the men that I've worked with, they're socialized to really not have feelings. Usually, most people have heard the expression, like, big boys don't cry. So like if a little boy's crying and if they hear the same message, like, well, big boys don't cry, suck it up and get on with it. I mean, if that happens once or twice, fine. But if it consistently happens, stuff like that over time, that's actually going to kind of alter that kid's reality. They're going to feel like they really don't have a right to be sad, and it's embarrassing to be sad, and it's shameful to be sad. And so men typically, and women too, but men typically grow up learning 3 emotions, which is anger, rage, and withdrawal. Those are usually the 3 they know how to express. Just because anytime they have a different emotion like pain or shame or guilt, that's just going to come out in anger. Anger is actually the disguise for all other emotions. So if you do get angry, chances are really good that underneath that, you're probably feeling some pain or fear or shame. And so that's always good to look at too. Like if you do get angry, is there something underneath that's really going on? So next, we'll talk a little bit about like why we get emotionally stuck. So our emotions are a reflection of our current reality. Like I mentioned before, the carried emotions, when we get overwhelmed or when our emotions are overwhelming, it usually means that something from our past was triggered. And so that's actually called trauma. Trauma can be something really big or something, what people would call like a little t trauma. So, I mean, an example would be like if somebody gave their first public speaking presentation and let's say something embarrassing happened or it didn't go well, they're going to associate that feeling with what happened. And so then all of a sudden public speaking is not going to be safe. And they're not going to want to do that anymore. And so the next time they have to do some public speaking presentations, they're going to kind of get stuck in what happened before. That's actually called a trauma. That's a little t trauma or a relational trauma. And so that can keep us emotionally stuck from being able to move on and to do things that we want to do. Or, those can be just kind of like the mindset blocks. And then there are, a few common defenses against emotions. One is that, like shame and pain, even fear. I mean, a lot of the hard emotions, they are so uncomfortable to feel. And so what we do is we just stuff it down and ignore it and just move on. And that, of course, your emotions they have to go somewhere. So that can show up in other things. Or what people end up doing is they'll smile a lot if they're talking about, like I've had some clients be like, oh yeah, my parents used to beat me all the time. And then they'll be like, it was pretty funny though. And they'll just kind of like lightly talk about it and maybe laugh a little bit. That's really just their way of detaching from that really painful memory or emotion. That's one thing to be aware of if you are talking about something that is really something that people wouldn't laugh at. If you're kind of laughing or making light of it, it's just something to be aware of, that maybe you're really just trying to detach from that emotion. Other people will kind of turn into a wall of words. They'll just say a bunch of stuff that you're just kind of like, what are you even talking about? I see that a lot with some therapy clients. If they, are uncomfortable talking about something painful, they'll just like talk and talk and talk. So it's one way, if you know someone who's doing that, or if you are doing that, you just take a deep breath and pause and go like, okay, wait a minute. I think I'm detaching from my emotions, and what am I actually feeling right now? Yeah. Any questions on all of that so far? We'll talk about feelings in general. This is, I'm just making sure I have my notes up. Feelings in general are going to be created by our thoughts. So if you think about it, our thought is literally creating the feeling. If, let's say I got fired from a job, my thought could be like, thank God I've wanted to get out of here anyway, and then I'm going to feel great. Or my thought could be like, oh my gosh, am I not a good enough employee? Like, what happened? How could this be? And then that's going to create emotions of anxiety, fear, shame, pain. All of it. So if next time you're feeling something, think about, what is my thought creating the emotion? I know the last time I did this class, I think it was right after Thanksgiving. And I used the example that week, I think it was that Wednesday before Thanksgiving. I was hosting Thanksgiving, and I remember just kind of feeling like a wave of anxiety. And I'm kind of walking around with it, and I was just like, why am I anxious? And then I just paused and was like, okay, what thought right now is creating this? And it really was just about like all the stuff I had to get done. Because the thoughts were just, look at how much you have to get done, and everyone's coming over tomorrow. So it's good to just think about, sometimes feelings come on really just like waves, and you're just like, where did that even come from? Or like, why am I anxious right now? And so just think about what's the thought creating that feeling. You actually are supposed to feel the feeling in your body first. Usually your body is going to feel something before you're aware of what your emotion is or what you're feeling. But if you kind of just use all three to come up with like, what is it that I'm feeling right now? That can be really telling, and that will help you ground yourself like in your reality. Emotional regulation, that is when you notice the feeling, breathe into it, and release it by breathing out. If you inhale and then exhale longer than your inhale, that will actually calm down your nervous system. So, and it's kind of just like releasing the emotion. Like, you feel it, you figure out what's going on, and you just exhale it out. And kind of imagine it leaving your body too. That can be helpful. If you just kind of imagine like whatever emotion, the fear, anxiety, whatever it is you're feeling, just kind of like inhale, exhale, and just kind of imagine it leaving. And that's a good way, that's one way to release it. A good example, if you're married, let's say if my husband makes me mad, I'll feel it, and he won't know what's going on, but I'll feel it. I'll choose to take a deep breath, and then I'll walk away for a minute. That, of course, is like a simple example, but it doesn't always work out that great. But because then your spouse might think like, why are you walking away? But that's one thing to just try, is like the breathing into it can help release your emotions. A lack of emotional regulation, that's kind of what I said earlier. Like people who have been traumatized as children, and trauma can be really big, or it can be something less than nurturing. So trauma, I mean, I use that word trauma a lot, but it's really like that relational trauma, and it could be nobody's fault either. It could be a trauma that nobody would call child protection over, but it was just something less than nurturing, something that you should have gotten but didn't. And it could be through nobody's fault either, but it still had an effect on you, or effect on you as an adult. And so, people will resist the uncomfortable feelings. Usually it's pain, fear, shame, guilt, maybe some anger. They might hold their breath. They might smile or talk, the wall of words talking. So next, this is the emotional chart link that I sent. You might be able to read it okay on the screen, but I thought it would be fun to quickly, we can do this in 10 seconds, but just notice, like, what are you feeling right now? Where in your body, what's the feeling word, and what are the thoughts? So you could even think about that like right now, or anything that happened right before you jumped on to this Zoom call. What you want to do, you can either start in the center and look at, if you kind of know the primary emotion, you can start there and then expand out. Or if you can look at the outer rings and pick out a word that might fit, and then look at what's the primary. So like, if somebody feels like inadequate, you might not really know what the primary emotion. I know some of these on the outer circle, some of the primary emotions have surprised me a little bit. Personally, I wouldn't have thought of sleepy as a sad. That's kind of an interesting emotion, but you can kind of just look at like, what's the word that resonates, and then even thankful down here. I would have probably put that in joyful, but that's actually peaceful. So it's kind of cool to just look at and see what's the outer ring, and then going into the center, just to bring more awareness. This example here, this is a feelings check exercise. This is really good for people who have a hard time knowing what they're feeling throughout the day. So for this, you want to take a moment and just freeze whatever it is you're doing or thinking, and just ask yourself, what am I feeling right now in this second? And so there's an example down here that says, like, right now I'm on my way to catch a plane in order to do a presentation. I feel some fear that I'll be late, some joy about the trip, some pain and guilt about leaving my kids, and then a little anger with my colleague because he didn't finish the graphics until the last minute. So you're kind of feeling all of those feelings at the same second. And that, like I said, that's really good for people who don't know what they're feeling at all. But it's good for us anyway, even if you are really in tune with your feelings, to do this anyway, because you'll feel what you feel. Then you can attach what the thoughts are to the feeling. My colleagues and I always talk about two types of clients that we have. We have the people that feel a little too much, and then the people that think a little too much. And so it's like you just kind of merge them together, meet in the middle a little bit. So you can just take a second and do that. I can actually go back to the feelings chart too, in case you weren't able to pull that up. Okay, so why is all of this important? If you bury your feelings, they have to go somewhere. And if you bury them, your emotions are going to store in your physical organs. and your physical health will be at risk. The other thing is that whatever state you walk in, if you're walking in a chronic state of shame or depression, or even happy or joyful, you're going to attract whatever you put out there. So if you're walking in, more of the negative emotions, you're going to make yourself miserable, and you're probably going to make the people around you a little bit miserable too. The feelings that don't get released, or the emotions that don't get released, they are going to show up, like anger will show up in your liver, and grief is going to show up in your lungs. Worry is going to show up in your stomach. Stress is going to show up in your heart and your brain. And fear is going to show up in your kidneys. There's more emotions, but these are just a few of the primary ones. So if you have essential oils that will help support, like your liver or your stomach or kidneys, anything like that, you can still use those oils to help release some of these emotions. So that's just one thing to look for. If you have any of these physical symptoms, go back and think about, do I have some emotions that aren't released? Grief was one that kind of took me by surprise. Once I learned this, I even noticed and grief can be anything. Like I'm trying to remember what it was I was grieving in particular. I think it was a transition of some sorts, but it was really just a minor, like grieving the one thing that was and moving into like a new thing. And I ended up getting like some respiratory stuff, and it was so random, but it was interesting to think about, like, oh, that actually is probably grief right now. So if you have like a spouse, or if your kids are traveling for like long periods of time and you notice yourself feeling some respiratory stuff, that might be grief. So it's kind of cool to just look at everything, your physical health and your emotions, and if they do line up in any way. The next thing that is really cool is, excuse me, emotional frequencies. And your emotional frequencies are all listed here. Shame is actually the lowest. I know shame and guilt are similar here. They're both at 20. Shame and guilt are kind of like cousins, though. Shame is actually, the voice of shame is going to say you are bad. Guilt is going to say you did something bad. So it's very subtle differences. Guilt and shame can be mixed up quite a bit. A lot of people might actually be feeling shame, but they'll label it as guilt. And so it's good to just look at what's kind of that voice saying. Is it saying you are bad or you did something bad? The positive emotions are all above 200, and any emotions greater than 200, that is going to strengthen your body. And so you can look at the positive emotions and look at how high those frequencies are, especially gratitude and enlightenment. Those are the highest positive emotions. And so you really just want to start taking charge of your thoughts and really looking at, are my thoughts really on the negative side? Are they on the positive side? And you can really start with shifting your thought patterns. The frequencies and your thoughts, like I mentioned earlier, don't let your negative thoughts take over. And you don't want to become a victim to your emotions either. I've seen this a lot with resentment. If people walk around in a chronic state of resentment is actually victim anger. It's you usually are resentful because you're kind of feeling like a victim, where you are like a little force up against this big force that you have no control over. when really you do have control. You probably just went along with something that you should have said no to, or you didn't set a boundary that you should have set a boundary for. And so some people do like to stay in states of resentment or chronic states of anger. Well, resentment is a lingering anger, but you just want to watch, like, don't be a victim to your emotions. Don't let your thought patterns control your actions. And I mean, usually if people are, you know, coming from a place of fear or pain, I mean, you'll act out a little bit. And so it's really just taking charge of your thought patterns. Let's see. I don't think I have anything else more on that. Oh, for some people, this can be really challenging. If it's so challenging that it becomes almost debilitating, that's probably a family of origin trauma that might need to be addressed with either reading some good books or therapy, or like really being intentional about using essential oils, which we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then these, I just really like, you know, some of this Bible verse and these quotes. You don't have to conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And everything is an energy, and that's all there is to it. So that's, you know, match the frequency to the reality you want, and you can't help but get that reality. And then I don't know who said this, but I saw this quote somewhere: your energy introduces you before you say a word. And how true is that? If you're, you know, like I said, if you're walking around in a chronic state of shame or anger, people around you are going to pick up on that. Oh, there is one thing I could say about that too. I thought this was kind of a cool analogy I learned a while back. If you think of the frequency of these emotions, if you think of yourself like a radio tower and kind of like what you're projecting into the world, you can't feel classical music and try to tune into like a jazz station. You know, you're going to project out there and that'll come back to you. So you really want to notice, you know, like if you're feeling broken, or if you have like a poverty mindset, you're not going to attract wealth, and you're not going to feel whole if you feel broken. And so that's just stuff to, and of course there's reasons that you became that way too. So it's really just looking at, you know, what is it that I'm projecting? And so like if I want classical music, I'm going to have to really look at, am I, you know, putting classical music out there? And so it's really just looking at, you know, like if you have the kind of like the, like the poverty mentality, then you really want to work on your abundance mentality and really project that out there. And then that will be, you know, come back to you. So, you know, kind of like if we, you know, misery likes company. So if we're walking around in misery and stirring up drama, we're going to bring in people around us that like to stir up drama and are probably a little bit miserable. If we walk around with a lot of joy and happiness, we're probably going to attract people who have a lot of joy and happiness. And so now we'll kind of go into like why essential oils. There is a lot of science behind this, but I really, I was trying to make this into about an hour, so I'm not going to go too much into the science, but basically your olfactory nerve is triggered by smell. And that is going to carry messages to your limbic system of the brain, which is where we process feelings and safety. And the example is, you know, we're processing feelings, but we also just go to, is this safe or is this not safe? And so, like, for example, if you smell rotten food, you're not going to want to eat it because your brain is like, that's not safe. Like, we could die. So it's kind of the same concept with things. The amygdala is a really small almond-shaped area. I think it's kind of on, above your brainstem a little bit, and then probably right behind your nose in the middle of your brain. Your amygdala is going to process the smell, and it's going to trigger the alarm bell to say you're in danger or you're safe, you can relax. And so anytime there's anytime there's been a trauma or like suppressed emotions, your amygdala is going to be activated, and you're going to know like this is either safe or not safe. And that can come up with vulnerability. I know some people feel, there's probably two different kinds of people in this world. You could be either boundaryless, I guess three different kinds. You could either be boundaryless or walled off or contained appropriately. If you are more of a, this is just one example. If you're more of a walled off person, you're not going to feel safe to share your emotions. And so that's kind of where that safety piece comes in. But essential oils, it's the only one of the five senses that will access that part of your brain. And so through the use of essential oils, you can, kind of release some of those emotions and get them moving. And so we'll talk about that a little bit, how to do that. But first I wanted to go over, most people have the Young Living Starter Kit, or if you're new to essential oils, you don't have them yet, you would probably order the starter kit. And so I wanted to go over some of the starter kit oils that you can use to start releasing emotions or to help support your emotions right now. And so frankincense and copaiba are both from trees. Any oil, the rule of thumb is any oil from a tree is going to be grounding, and any, kind of citrus oil is going to be uplifting. And so frankincense and copaiba are going to be really good for grounding. It'll enhance mindfulness, promote stability, and encourage security. And then your calming oils are going to be Stress Away and lavender. That'll, soothe stress and tension. It'll promote feelings of security, which is what your amygdala needs if you feel unsafe. And it will promote relaxation. And then the energizing oils are going to be peppermint and panaway. You'll just feel more energized when you use those. It can also be helpful for if you do have something that you're, like a presentation or something that you might be fearful. That will help give you energy and motivation. Next, there's Daijies and Thieves. So a healthy gut is going to equal healthy emotions. And so these oils are going to be great to help support your gut health and your immune system, which will then help your emotions. And then lastly, from the starter kit, Raven is going to, again, it'll help support, how do I say this? You're going to use it basically on your chest. And so that is like a comforting oil. It'll promote movement when you're feeling stuck, or you can use just during times of sadness. Outside the starter kit, though, I put together some of my favorite oils to use for specific emotions. And so Release is one of my favorites to use over the liver. And what you want to do, and we'll get into more of this in a little bit, what you want to do is really be intentional when you use, or I should say, to get the most out of this, you really want to be intentional when you use the essential oils to specifically support emotions. And so Release, you'll put that over your liver, take some deep breaths in, and really imagine the anger leaving your body. Some people imagine colors, or they'll imagine like a spiral just leaving their body. And keep doing that until you feel a shift. And that goes with all of the oils. Anytime you use an essential oil to support your emotion. And then hope, joy, and transformation are some favorites for using when you need a pickup or you're feeling kind of melancholy or sad. You would use joy would go over your heart. Transformation, I think inhaling that one is probably one of the best ways, just inhaling it and imagine just releasing any of those more negative emotions that you're feeling. And then hope would be really good to help support, like if you're walking around feeling any shame or guilt, you could put hope behind your ears and just inhale it and imagine those harder emotions. Or really you could use that to, even transformation would be a good one to use, and just you look at the gifts of each emotion, and just look at like, I'm a human being. We all make mistakes. Shame is actually a spectrum. Like I said, healthy shame is embarrassment, but some people go down into toxic shame, thinking they're just like the worst people ever. They're like scum of the earth. That would be toxic shame. And so if you did something that you're embarrassed about, it's okay to be embarrassed. That's healthy shame, but you just don't want to be in that toxic shame. And so it's just bringing yourself up to your humanity, because we're all human and we all make mistakes. And then Valor and White Angelica. These two are probably my favorites to use. This combination will allow the energy to flow, and the two of them together, I think, just support like the greatest joy of all. And so use these two all the time. You can apply White Angelica to your shoulders, rub Valor on your feet and on your chest, and really just use those two to either enhance really positive emotions or all the time just to promote higher frequency feelings. And then Present Time and Harmony. Gary Young has said, I've listened to some of his emotional talks, and he'll say, you're not alive if you're living in the past. And that's true. And resentment is kind of that, like living in the past too. And so harmony is really good for really just your overall balance. If you're really wanting to work on releasing some harder emotion, you could actually start with harmony first, and that will help just kind of get your whole body into harmony. And then you can work on releasing any of the other emotions that you want to release. So you could use that first, or you don't have to, of course, but harmony will just kind of support like the overall everything, like your spiritual body, your emotional self. And present time, if you do find yourself living in the past a lot, present time, of course, will help you stay focused in the present. And then you can work on releasing the past because you don't live in the past anymore. So how to get the most out of an emotional release is, first you want to really notice what's happening in your body first, and then you could look at the chart and think, what's the feeling word attached to that? And then what are the thoughts creating the feeling? And just like the radio frequency example, notice the energy in your body that you want to leave. And look at kind of like your intention for the release. So if you have thoughts of like, I'm not good enough, or I'm never going to get this done in time, or any of the lower frequency thoughts, you would want to set an intention that has the opposite, that's positive. So, you know, the I'm not good enough would be I am good enough. Or, you know, thoughts like, I'm never going to get this done, you would flip it and say, I am going to get this done with grace and ease, or, something like that, whatever the opposite is to the negative thought. And you do want to, I always like to, if I'm experiencing harder emotions, I always go back to what joy is like. And so joy is going to be joy or happiness. You're going to feel a warmth and swelling in your heart. And this is kind of a side note, but that emotion is actually attached to really healthy self-esteem. And so self-esteem is when we go one up or one down. I know a common phrase is like, oh, they have low self-esteem, or I need to raise my self-esteem. You actually can't raise or lower your self-esteem. You either have it or you don't. And so, and really we all go one up and one down all day long, but you really just want to notice like what triggers you to go one up or what triggers you to go one down. Grandiosity is the opposite of shame. You're going to grandiosity, people who are really one up, that's actually shame, and they're overcompensating. Shame is actually fueled, self-esteem. No, sorry. Let me back up a second. One up and one down, that's going to be fueled by the same emotion, which is contempt. And so the grandiosity piece is contempt at other people, and shame is contempt at yourself. And so, like true, healthy, in the middle self-esteem is going to be, I have inherent worth just for living on this planet and just for being here. I'm no better than any other people, and I'm not less than any other people. We're all the same on this earth. And so when you really feel like you're walking in that healthy self-esteem, that emotion attached to it is going to be like a warmth and swelling in your heart, and that is going to be joy. And so I always personally kind of use that as my guide to get back to kind of that like center. I know self-esteem is, like I said, we all go one up and one down all day, but if you kind of notice you're in a chronic like one down, less than, or even in a chronic one up, although a lot of times people don't notice their one up. Usually it's all the people around them will notice it. But if you catch it, just bring yourself back down to humanity level and know that you're not better than anyone else. And so like I said, I just kind of like to use that as my template to go back to. So joy is going to be that emotion, like the equal than, enough. And so anyway, that was kind of a rabbit trail, but just to kind of get back to setting intention is really, like I said, know what's going on in your body, what your thoughts are, where you're feeling it, and then set your positive intention, which is usually the opposite of the negative thought, and then inhale the essential oil. And then as you inhale it, just imagine that feeling just kind of like leaving your body or lessening, and keep repeating that until you feel a shift. And that can also go with a memory too. So if you, I'll just use that public speaking example. If you, had a horrible, like first public speaking, and then you have to do another one, you're probably going to remember that first one. And so you would, before you do some public speaking, you would have to, set that intention, like whatever it is, I'm good the way I am. And then inhale that essential oil, thinking about that first memory, and just kind of watch that initial memory dissolve. And keep doing that until you feel a shift. And so I hope all of this makes sense. And then lastly, we will do kind of, this is like an aroma freedom reset. And this you can do really quick, anywhere, anytime. Of course, you'll just want to have your essential oils on you. But first you will want to do, like identify the situation that feels like overwhelming, frustrating, or confusing. So if you know you're about to walk into something that's going to be challenging, or if you suddenly feel something that's really hard or overwhelming, just kind of identify whatever that situation is, and then name the feeling using an actual feeling word. Locate that feeling in your body, and then identify the negative thought that is creating the feeling. And then what you would want to do is put a drop of lavender, frankincense, and Stress Away in the palm of your hand. And then picture whatever that situation is, or whatever that memory is. Notice the feeling word that you're feeling, where you're feeling that in your body. And then just inhale that, that little lavender, frankincense, Stress Away blend. Inhale that and just notice any shifts that happen. The original like memory or situation might kind of fade, or you might notice a sudden like calming feeling in your body. And keep doing that until you feel a shift in whatever that situation is. So if you have your oils right now, go ahead and try this if you want to, or just in the future use it. I like to keep I just pre-mix these blends. This is from AFT, this aroma or this memory release blend. It's equal parts of lavender, frankincense, and Stress Away. So you can just pre-mix some of that and keep it with you at all times. And this literally will take 60 seconds, if that. So go ahead and try that. And then you can actually just do this every day, or like I was mentioning, kind of with that frequency piece, like with the radio waves, you can imagine how do you want to be in a situation, or how do you want to be in this world, and think about what that feels like if you if you know you want to have like really healthy self-esteem and see everyone as equals, you don't want to go one down or one up. Just imagine what is that like to feel. You could even go back and think of a time that you did feel that, and think about what did that feel like in your body, and what emotion word would you attach to that, and kind of just like tap into those old feelings that you felt. And use, this memory release blend or any oil that you feel is uplifting, and just inhale it with kind of that intention of like enhancing those positive feelings. And you could even do that for kind of the rule of thumb is if you can feel that kind of like that positive, higher frequency feeling, if you can do that for like less than 20 seconds, really about 20 seconds is all it takes. Just do that several times a day. And just kind of remember like that positive feeling, or however you want to be in this world. And then use whatever oil you're drawn to help enhance that. Lastly, this is a lot of the reading that I've pulled from. And so all of the feeling charts are by Pia Mellody. I've done a lot of training under her. And so most of that information came from her book, Facing Codependence. And Releasing Emotional Patterns with Essential Oils is one of my favorite books. And then Feelings Buried Alive, Never Die. I think everyone should have that book. And Healing Oils from the Bible. I use a lot of the frequency information came from that. And The Aroma Freedom Technique is a really good book if you do find yourself having those mind blocks, or like a hard time with your mindset, that's a really good book too to use with kind of helping to like plow through those mindsets with essential oils. And that is about it. So if you are new to essential oils, all of this, of course, is Young Living, and you can, if you have oils, great. If you don't, just talk to the person who referred you to this, or if you don't have anyone who referred you, then I can help you. But like I said, a lot of these oils are right from the starter kit, so anyone can do this. Any questions on any of this? Everyone will have access to the replay for a little while, so you can always go back and watch it. But if anyone does have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself, and you don't even have to be on camera. I think you can just unmute yourself and ask. At least I think you should be able to unmute yourself. Do you know, Sarah, like, are you able to unmute yourself okay?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's just like tapping on the screen, and then there'll be a button at the bottom. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
I was thinking about combining Valor and White Angelica in a roller bottle.
Oh, that would be good. That'd be a good idea. Yeah.
Okay. Or should I keep them separate and apply them to the places you said separately?
I've never done a roller ball of the two. I think people have, though.
Okay.
But you could do a roller ball and see how, like, just kind of apply it on your collarbones and chest and see how that works.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'll report back.
They smell good together. Yeah, let me know. I've never thought to combine them. So yeah, that's a good idea. Mm-hmm. But any other questions? I'm actually gonna post this. Thought it would be easiest to just post it in a Facebook group. So for everyone who signed up for this, you'll have access in the Facebook group. And then if you do have any questions that come up, you can definitely feel free to post in the group, and I can go in and answer any questions. But also I'd be curious too, if you you try some of the stuff, I'd be curious to see how it works for people too. But otherwise, if there's no questions, I am going to stop recording.